as promised, I'm going to show you a quick edit on an image that was supplied kindly by Isabel. So this is a perfect example of how to shoot for a composite. So actually put some thought into it before and shoot an image in a way which is going to make your compositing process really easy. I always stress that doing composite work, it's great fun, but really you don't want to be adding to your workload. You want to create stuff as quickly as possible without sitting there for half an hour creating shadows and making your life actually more difficult. I think as photographers we spend enough time at the computer, and the idea of these is to make your life easier, not harder. So Isabel kindly forwarded me the image. This is the raw image, and this is one that she had already worked on. So for the purpose of this, I am going to use this one. In an ideal world, if you look at the space above Monty and below him, you probably could have done with leaving a little bit more from the original for the composite, because when you look at the actual backdrop, the texture is different to the image it was shot on. It's not a big drama because we can do some blending, but in the edited, do you know what, actually I'm not going to use the edited version, I'm going to use the raw file just to show you how to do it. And the challenge here will be just making sure that those textures intermingle well, and also Isabel's raw image is on the fur is on the creamy side, whilst obviously the backdrop is more white. So let's have a little go. Let's open the backdrop, and oh, it's already open. And then I'm going to open Isabel's raw file, which I'm not going to be using any actions for this. It's just going to be a quick hand at it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to quickly crop to a square and just actually retain as much of the fur around Monty. We can always rotate him later. I'm going to slightly brighten it up, slightly reduce the contrast, and go more colour temperature, go a little bit colder to get rid of those yellows, which we can further tweak later. And I'm going to open this image. So what do? It's the usual thing. We are going to drag the JPEG and we're going to pop Monty onto the backdrop. There he is. Let's close down the original image, and okay, so here we are. Now when I processed from RAW, I could have actually saved it as a bigger JPEG, but it's not a problem because we can just move him along and do an edit, free transform, which will allow us to both rotate and adjust Monty's size. So okay, so this is not quite the right angle, so we are going to rotate him this way, and now we are going to drag the corner, hold down your shift button, or the little arrow up, I think that's the shift button, and enlarge Monty to be a little bit more in line with the backdrop size. Here we go, maybe that's even a little bit too big. Okay, so Isabel did a really good job where she was shooting this image, because the light is coming from the left, which matches the backdrop, which is fantastic. He's really lovely and scrunched up, so the actual way he'll fit into a circle will look really lovely. He's got a relaxed face, so yeah, it should be good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cover up that image of Monty with a layer mask. Sorry, that was meant to be a black layer mask, so this is a white. We're going to go edit, edit, fill with black, and now we're going to reveal Monty underneath. Goodness gracious, I am clicking in way too many places. Okay, so select the white paintbrush, make sure on the right hand side here there's an image of the backdrop, on top there's an image of Monty and it's covered with a black layer mask, and we are going to use a white paintbrush. Make sure the layer mask is selected, and we're going to reveal Monty from underneath. Now the opacity on your brush should be 100%, and bring a little bit closer. I'm going to actually make the paintbrush a little bit bigger as well. And here we go, let's paint him in. So in an ideal world, I want to retain all those shadows where on the original image he was lovely and sunk into the backdrop. And here he is. Okay, so obviously at the moment the shadows are there, but the issue we have is that Monty is a lot darker and it looks like it's been photoshopped in. So we're going to do a few things to fix this. I am going to actually rotate him a little bit more. I don't know if I actually did anything there or not. Press enter, and I'm going to go back to the paintbrush. Paint a little bit more in. And now we're going to be working on painting some of this out. So we're going to switch brushes to black, and we're going to start off with just reducing the opacity to 80% and going around the edges here. Okay, now we're going to take the opacity down to 40%, and we're going to let some of those curls show through. Just retain those shadows as much as possible whilst trying to intermingle the two textures. Now we're going to take it down to 20%. Now with 20% it will slightly lighten the shadows, which are a little bit too heavy anyway for this composite, but that's not a problem. So what we don't want is we don't want it to look like I said, composited. So here I'm going to add these shadows back. Wherever you see that things are not quite working, like here, you might want to add these shadows back. And sometimes the textures don't intermingle, but you're essentially working with the white and the black brush to paint and take away detail as and where needed. And this is just done by eye. Okay. So what's bothering me here is the yellow. Obviously the yellow is making it look like it's not quite right. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to just grab Monty, that layer, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to put it onto screen mode, which basically will lighten him and will lighten the fur, it will lighten everything. So you can see I've got that layer duplicated on screen mode, and screen just lightens everything. So if you look, opacity down, opacity up, and actually just slightly adjusting the blending mode, here we go, that's already looking better and more in line with the backdrop, which is quite bright. Okay, we obviously don't want to make him have his skin washed out, so his skin is still looking good. In terms of blown highlights, if you look at that ear there, they are a little bit, but it's not something that really ever bothers me, to be honest. That loss of detail, you can bring it back by just grabbing the, making sure you select it on that layer, grabbing the black brush and painting those highlights on the hat back in. You can even darken the skin if it's too light for you. Okay. So for me that looks nice. We've got all these shadows. The textures here are a little bit confused at the bottom. There's quite a line. So I'm just going to do merge down. So the top layer has now merged with the layer below. No, I'm not going to do that. Step backwards. I'm going to sort this out first. Okay, so I'm going to white, opacity 22%, and I'm going to do some blending here, which just to improve this. And you can do the blending on both layers. I'm just going to add some of that original background to the curls. Okay, let's see what it looks like now. Okay, that looks okay, because I think the main thing that's bothering here is the yellow. So I'm going to just flatten the image, and now a nice little neat trick to stop this happening is we simply go to layer adjustment, hue saturation, and select here. You've got the preset default and you've got the color channels. So all I want you to do is go to your yellows and reduce the saturation in the yellows, and watch what happens in the image. So you can see before, or you can increase them just so you can see the effect, and after. So this is the original, and now I'm reducing the saturation in the yellows just to take out that yellow that is making that look darker, and straight away the image is pretty much fixed. Now, the thing that you might struggle with is sometimes what that will do is take out a lot of the yellow out of the skin tones. If the baby's jaundiced, great, but it can make the skin look a little bit patchy, so you have to be careful. But if the baby is not jaundiced, it actually can make warm skin look really cold, which is also not great. So obviously you've done this on a layer mask, you've used the adjustment layers on the right hand side. What you can do now, if you want to, you can grab a black brush and you can paint, just increase the opacity back to 100, and you can paint the yellow back in wherever you want. So if you want to paint the yellow back in on the skin, you can do that here. But actually for Monty, he couldn't have had a lot of yellow in his skin, because I don't feel like it's done anything you know, terrible to his skin. I think his skin looks nice, and as you can see, those textures actually look absolutely fine in terms of intermingling with each other. You know, it's something where nobody would really notice as a composite, because you have got all those lovely shadows there. They have been retained, the textures have been retained, and it looks like the texture just changes sort of around the edges. But you know, unless you had a really trained eye, I think it would be difficult to spot that this is a composite, especially as you know, I'm looking at it on a really big screen, and that for that to be printed and for it to actually show, I think it would have to be printed at 30 inches plus, and again, not to the untrained eye. So yeah, so that is Monty's composite. I would also just very quickly just get rid of the whole thing and go back to the beginning. We've just got the backdrop, and I'm going to grab Isabel's edited file and pop him into here. And if we look, edit, free transform, really simple. There he is. Okay, enter, cover up, and let's bring Monty in. Make sure your opacity is 100%. And it's going to be pretty much the same method. This is from Isabel's edited JPEG. And obviously you can see where the image has now been cropped above there. So what I'm going to do is same thing, reduce the opacity, say actually straight away to 60%. Just do a bit of blending there. And then reduce it to 20–25%. Bit of blending there, maybe slightly lighten those shadows. There we go, and that looks fine apart from this bit at the bottom again, and you can actually see where the image was cropped, so we need to fix that. Make sure you keep your brush nice and soft. Right, yeah, so you don't want to paint in where the image has been cropped, which is what I've just done, so I'm just going to go a step backwards. Okay, so slightly soften those shadows. Okay, so that's all fine. And then we can, yeah, that blending looks okay. Flatten the image, hue saturation, yellow channel, and take down that saturation on the yellows. Here we go. Flatten image. And now what you can also do if you wanted to do a little bit more extra blending is you can duplicate the channel, go to screen, sorry, the layer, go to screen, cover up, grab the paintbrush and paint in a little bit of that in, so that this green layer is just going to lighten the image for you a little bit. You didn't actually do an amazing job down here. You can see this line there, you can see the blending, and the reason why you can see it is because I was working from a cropped image. This is why it's better to work with a raw image. The only way I would see of fixing this here now would be to just duplicate a layer, grab a paintbrush, make sure you've got white selected, and I would literally just paint over this with white. Very low opacity, the whole thing. And what it does is just going to soften the lines a little bit. So you can see opacity at the top is 13%. And what that's done is sort of just blended everything together a little bit more. So this is before, after. Yeah, so you can see that he's now nicely sunk in. So yeah, so work from the raw if you can. Or, you know, don't crop the image as much and edit it, then do the composite and then crop the standalone image afterwards, so you retain as much of that original fur as you can. But either way, the main thing that is about it really well here is the lighting matched, the positioning was great, and you know, and it was perfect for this composite. So that's it. I hope that helps. Any questions, just ask me in the group.